Good morning. Over the past holidays together, we have had conversations about how we think about ourselves and how others think about us. On Rosh Hashanah, we discussed anti-Semitism and how others saw us. Last night, we explored how we as American Jews think about ourselves, what narrative do we tell ourselves, and this morning, I think it's imperative for us to contemplate how we think about Israel and how we think about Zionism in general. Reflecting on the year since October 7th, we have seen a years-long battle. Thomas Friedman, in his column earlier this week, asked the questions: who is winning the battle on the ground, and who is winning the battle of the story? He writes, "I am thinking about today is how even after a year of warfare, in which Hamas and Hezbollah and Israel have inflicted terrible pain on one another's forces and civilians, no one has decisively won the battle on the ground or the battle for the story." At the end of his column, Friedman suggests that the biggest threat to Israel is not its external enemies, rather the internal unraveling of the social fabric due to poor leadership and a bad story. In his words, it's truly a lack of clear unifying national purpose around the conflict, which really makes me wonder, what are we telling ourselves and why? We need to engage in self-reflection and ask challenging questions. We need to ask if Israel's military approach is inhumane, and also wonder, what alternative could there be? Is there a better strategy? Let's consider just a few facts that make everything challenging and complicated. Current Israeli estimates of the tunnel system under Gaza range from 350 to 500 miles, a complex tunnel network where Hamas lives, holds hostages, stores weapons, builds missiles, and moves from place to place. They have built many of their most important locations in their tunnel system under hospitals, schools, and so on. Their server farm, for example, was built under the offices of UNRWA, according to the Israeli military. Daphne Richmond Barrick, the author of Underground Warfare, writes in Foreign Policy magazine, quote, "Never in the history of tunnel warfare has a defender been able to spend months in such confined spaces. The digging itself, the innovative ways Hamas has made use of the tunnels, and the group's survival underground has been unprecedented. In other words, Hamas often underground, Israelis often above ground, and Hamas seeking to put civilians in between that horrific sandwich." David Brooks has argued the importance of addressing the root causes and recognizing that it's imperative to win the hearts and minds, when in his column he cited retired General David Petraeus, that, quote, "over time, hearts and minds still matter." The battle is not just in Gaza. Unfortunately, there's a battle taking place in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, and even with Iran. And if that's not hard enough, a battle online, a struggle over how the West sees Israel, how Israelis see their own leadership, how Palestinians see themselves, how we as American Jews see all of this. Yuval Noah Harari suggests that Israel is in fact at a crossroads, not in terms of its existence, but in terms of its identity. The soul of the country, the future of Judaism, is at stake. He draws parallels to the end of the Second Temple period, reminding us that Judaism faced an existential challenge before and emerged transformed. Again, I believe we need transformation. To understand the complex and competing narratives, let's take one pause and think about how the Palestinians view what is engaging, what is happening. By exploring the Palestinian Center for Policy Survey and Research, an accepted polling group and think tank who explored the feelings and thoughts of Palestinians in December of 2023, Their poll showed that 3/4 of Palestinians believed the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel was correct, and the ensuing Gaza war had increased support of Hamas on the West Bank. However, just a few weeks ago, they released another poll. Support for the attack in Hamas has dropped. A majority of Palestinians still supported the attack, but for the first time, a significant number are questioning its strategy. From the Israeli perspective, for us, it's never war again, quote, says Avner Golav, the vice president of Research Alliance in a Tel Aviv think tank. My generation now faces a question that I never thought I would face, and that is whether the Jewish state can exist in the hostile Middle East. We need to make sure the answer is yes. Of Israelis polling at another think tank called the JPPI, quote, Israelis feel that the world does not appreciate enough the huge effort the IDF is making not to harm innocent people and not to hit civilian targets. The Pew Research Center conducted a survey in March and then again in early April and found that 40% of Israelis felt the country's military response was just about right. But there was, of course, a sharp divide. Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs saw it slightly differently. Almost 75% of Israeli Arabs, who make up about 1/5 of the country, see the war as having gone too far compared to just 4% of Jews. Again, the news not all bad because Israel has still maintained its relationship with other Arab nations. Those nations who joined the Abraham Accords have preserved their relationship, and the concept of a regional coalition against Iran is still in place. As an American Jew, the war sparked on October 7th has underscored that no matter where a Jew resides, their identity, their sense of security is inextricably linked to the state of Israel. Well, what do we do about all of this, and how do we have all of these competing narratives? We have to have difficult conversations. Kenneth Stern, the director of the Bard Center for the Study of Hate, in his book, The Conflict Over the Conflict, The Israel-Palestinian Campus Debate, emphasizes how accusations of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia can be weaponized to shut down legitimate criticism of all sides. It is not all criticism which needs to be shut down. Rather, we need to be able to create a safe space to have nuanced conversations. And to achieve that, he recommends open dialogue, a respect for disagreement, and a commitment to nuance, a true commitment to actually slowing down and hearing one another. As Israel continues to wage this costly, this painful war, I think we need to remember why we have to actually have a resolution this time. We cannot let this drag on. The war of attrition, a war that frequently goes forgotten, waged between Israel and Egypt between 1967 and 1970. It followed the Six-Day War and was characterized by its prolonged nature of these two nations attempting truly to just wear each other down through low intensity and continuous conflict. The long-term impact, the inconclusive nature of that war led directly to the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And the psychological impact of the war was significant. It demonstrated Egypt's ability to challenge Israel militarily, which some observers saw a shifting balance in Egypt's favor despite a lack of territorial gains. Then there was peace. There was a period on the conflict. We are in a war of attrition now, one with Iran and all of its proxies, and we need to learn from our past. I want to look at one more example, one from 2,000 years ago, when Rome laid siege to Jerusalem and laid bare the Jewish people's fatal flaw of that moment, their internal division. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai grieved, "Woe unto us if the Holy Temple is destroyed. It will be because we could not live together in peace." There were 4 factions which were tearing the city apart, and unity was truly what was needed. The Sicarii resorted to clandestine killings. The Zealots pushed for armed rebellion. The Pharisees sought peaceful Torah study, and the Sadducees favored an alliance with Rome. The fracturing led Rabbi Yochanan to lament, "We are one people, but we act so differently." While the Romans patiently tightened their grip, the Jews' senseless hatred, the infighting sealed our fate. The fall of Jerusalem began not from without, but from within, as brother turned against brother in a tragic moment of disunity. Today we stand at a national crossroads, torn between conflicting visions of our future and grapple with fundamental questions of identity, of security, and of our moral duty. Some see a militarily strong Israel as our only key to survival, while others emphasize a peaceful coexistence and humanitarian concerns are absolutely necessary. We debate how to balance tradition with modernity, interpret our heritage amid competing contemporary challenges, and define Jewish identity in the global world. These tensions ripple through our entire community, touching on diaspora-Israel relations, the role of Judaism and religion in public life, and how to heal internal rifts. We are challenged to maintain unity while honoring our diversity. And this moment demands, as Kenneth Stern had suggested, open dialogue, mutual understanding, and a renewed commitment to our shared value, even if we disagree how to go about living them. As Harari wisely noted, we must acknowledge two parallel truths: the Jewish people's right to self-determination and historic connection to the land, along with the Palestinians' equal rights and deep ties to that same soil. And our task now is to find a path forward that respects both competing narratives. A challenge. It is a challenge. Today we live in a very polarized society, one that believes there is one winner and there's one loser. There is right and there is wrong. A society devoid of nuance. We need nuance. This is not a zero-sum game where one side wins and the other loses. And this polarization is shutting down our ability and our capacity to have empathy and to maintain an open mind to solutions. We fail to hold multiple narratives in our minds, and then we fail to create the empathy that is needed. I want to remind us of something that I think we have forgotten. The paths of peace demand a painful reckoning with justice. And Yuval Harari pointed out recently that every peace deal in history required giving up some level of justice. We must view peace and justice as counterweights on a delicate scale, acknowledging that absolute justice is an unattainable illusion. Our challenge lies in how we perceive the conflict. Many project a simplistic colonizer indigenous narrative onto a far more complex reality. And we incorrectly take a model of colonization, one which has lived within the Western ideal, one that has been a part of European and therefore United States countries' history. And we are imposing it onto a situation that is entirely different. We hear people say, okay, Israelis are white Europeans who came to colonize the indigenous Palestinians. And there are some kernels of truth in that. But again, the model's wrong. It denies the fact that there were Jews continuously present in the land going back over 3,000 years. And for 2,000 years, Jews were one of the chief victims of European civilization. And Jews have remained in the land. And Jews have spread out themselves across the Middle East. It ignores that 50% of Israeli Jews are not European. They are descendants of Middle Eastern Jews from Yemen, from Europe, from Egypt, from Iraq, who were brutally expelled from their homes. Let me underline that word, brutal. After 1948 by Arab governments in revenge. Looking ahead, both at the realities on the ground and the story we tell ourselves, Israel is facing an existential challenge. Yet we have the capacity to unite, to apply all of our energy, our ingenuity, the startup nation that we celebrated. That thinking power can be used and harnessed and applied to Israeli society and to the conflict. I am not absolving the Palestinians of their responsibility. This holiday, this morning, Yom Kippur is all about us taking responsibility. It's about our responsibility in the process. I love Israel. I have visited Israel almost every single summer since I was a teenager, when I went on my very first Nifty trip and the Israel bug bit me and I fell in love with the place. After college, I lived for a year on a kibbutz, and then I moved to Jerusalem, where I was a student at HUC. And while there, I engaged in a mock peace negotiation with Palestinians. There were leaders from both groups who were nominated to be part of this conference. And what I learned at the conference, I still carry with me. We failed in negotiations. We still had arguments over the city of Jerusalem. But that experience really solidified in me about how we need to trust each other. The pain of unresolved trauma and the erosion of a positive outlook has real impacts. And yet I still believe. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shows us how he inspired his students to live meritorious lives. He said to his 5 closest disciples, "Go out and discern what is the proper way to which a person should cling." Rabbi Eliezer said, "A good eye." Rabbi Yeshua said, "A good friend." Rabbi Yossi said, "A good neighbor." Rabbi Shimon said, "One who considers the outcome of a deed." Rabbi Elazar said, "A good heart." Yochanan responded, summarizing their findings by telling them that having a good heart includes all of these personality traits. We need good hearts now more than ever. As we reflect this Yom Kippur, let us remember the importance of holding multiple narratives. It is through the ability that we can hope to find a path to peace and understanding. We must work to overcome our polarization, to see the humanity in those with whom we disagree. We must strive for solutions that acknowledge the rights and narratives of others around us as valid. Let's take inspiration from our history. Let's learn from our mistakes and move forward with open hearts and open mind. May this Yom Kippur be a time of true reflection, by taking steps toward a more peaceful and understanding future.